Welcome back to Channel 3, I'm FamiComplex. Today we've got Crystalis, SNK's 1990 action RPG. Crystalis is one of my all-time favorite games, but it's also one I haven't played to completion since I was a kid. Now I'm actually a little worried because what if it sucks? What if my memories are a lie like so many LJN games? Let's find out. In 1997, October 1st, the End Day, a global thermonuclear war destroyed existence as we know it. Must have missed that one. But, I mean, knowing me, I probably slept through it. Anyway, it's an interesting choice for a game released in 1990 to predict the end of the world only 7 years later. The Japanese version was also released in 1990, but that version gives a much less specific date, in October, somewhere between 1990 and 1999. So at best, they gave us a bit more than 8 years to live. Bleak. This right here is why games use dates like 20XX. I mean, Judgment Day came and went without incident because John Connor prevented it, right? What's your excuse, Crystalis? It's also interesting that they gave us all this information up front. Were this game made today, they'd likely save the timeline for the big reveal, a la Horizon Zero Dawn, but I don't think the world was quite ready for that kind of storytelling in video games. With that said though, the plot is remarkably well done for an NES RPG. There are even some genuine surprises and twists that you wouldn't expect. So anyway, in 1997, the war caused the Earth's creatures to mutate into monsters, and technology was abandoned in favor of the study of magic. A giant floating tower was constructed to ensure mankind's survival, and that's all the information you'll get about that. And you'll just want to keep that in mind because the game won't mention it again until the end. So now it's 100 years later, the monsters roam free, and humanity has banned technology entirely, until Emperor Dragon combines science with magic in order to take control of the world. And that's where you come in, waking up in a cryo chamber and busting through cave walls like the goddamn Kool-Aid Man.
Oh yeah!
You're assisted in this endeavor by the sages Zebu, Tornel, Asina, and Kensu, who teach you new magic and sprinkle bits of world-building information. If the names Asina and Kensu sound familiar, that's because they're Athena and Kenso from a few of SNK's other games, most notably King of Fighters. The overall goal of the game is to collect the 4 elemental swords and combine them to form Crystalis, the ultimate weapon / hardware override key. As a side note, the Japanese title is Godslayer Sonata of the Faraway Sky, which is just a way cooler title. Of course, what matters most for a game like this is gameplay. People like to call this a Zelda clone, but that isn't really fair. There are parallels, but I think the comparison kind of distracts from the things that make this game great on its own merits. It's an NES game, so there are 2 buttons, one of which uses the sword and the other which uses magic. Both buttons are used for equipped items depending on the item's type. The swords are elemental, which allows for a charge blast, and some items that you collect over the course of the game will increase the power of the charge blast. There are 4 different elemental swords to collect. In many areas you'll find enemies that are only susceptible to one element, while other enemies in the area might be susceptible to another type. So you'll need to switch swords on the fly depending on what you're attacking, which adds a nice strategic element to the game. In addition, the 3rd level charge blast for each sword uses up your magic power, and the sword is charged by holding the attack button down while not moving. It becomes a bit of a balancing act, getting your attacks to level 2 and then holding them there without moving to level 3 and wasting magic power. It works, and it works really well. Also, the continue functionality here starts from the last screen transition, and you can save in safe areas like towns, so it's actually a pretty friendly game for a busy adult. In this way, it's pretty ahead of its time. There's also one huge caveat in case you decide to play it: you should get a walkthrough or a strategy guide. I'm never ever one to suggest walkthroughs for your first playthrough, but this one's kind of an asshole. There are obscure solutions that the game doesn't explain, which is pretty standard for NES games, but even worse, this one has roadblocks that you might not even be able to tell are roadblocks. Welcome to NES-era game design. An easy example to give here is the second Dragon. You'll need to use this statue to reveal his true form. It doesn't outright tell you this is the case, and you'll even appear to do damage when you're fighting. Then once you've gotten his second form, it turns out you can't actually hit him unless you've got the power ring, which I didn't see referenced anywhere in the game. Not that I can say for a fact that it isn't there, I probably just didn't see it. Basically, if you're not using a walkthrough or a strategy guide, there will be at least a couple points toward the end of the game where you'll be backtracking all over the known world in the vain hope that you find an item you didn't know existed. If you're a purist, have at it. I'm just giving you a fair warning. In 2000, Crystalis was ported by Nintendo to the Game Boy Color. I won't cover this version here because I simply don't have the time, but in short, the story was changed, the soundtrack was changed, and the strategic sword swapping was removed entirely, which effectively removes or reduces just about everything that made this game special. It's still fun and still worth a look, but you really should do yourself a favor and play the real thing first. I intentionally tried my best not to spoil the story here because I genuinely think this is a game worth playing for yourself. So though we may be in danger of nostalgic bias, let's get to the scores. As of the time this was written, Crystalis has an average loose cartridge price of about $19, which is a 5 out of 6 on our price scale. It's also worth noting that Crystalis is included on the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection, which is available on Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and Windows. I won't give it extra points for this, but it's probably the most easily accessible game I've covered thus far. Graphically, the game is beautiful, and with only minimal slowdown issues in certain scenes. But it's not doing anything too technically impressive, and though some scenes are gorgeous, it's a 5 out of 6 overall. Sound, on the other hand, sound effects are used to great effect to help the player understand that they're not doing damage with their equipped gear, and in general, the sounds are pretty good for the NES. The music, though, it's fantastic. The memorable soundtrack and clever use of sound is gonna give us our first 6 out of 6. Gameplay? As I mentioned, I love the sword switching mechanics and managing the sword power. The spells are useful and the boss battles are fun, if occasionally frustrating. The biggest complaint is the caveat I mentioned earlier. There are times you'll wind up stuck with no indication that you've gotten stuck. I can't forgive this just because of the time, like, you don't have to tell me where to find the item, just tell me that I need to find an item. Between this and the massive slog that is the endgame, it ends up as a 5 out of 6, but man, it really had potential to be a perfect score here too. For replayability, there's really not much to be said. There's not any reward or reason to play the game again, even if it's fun. I'll call it a 4 out of 6, mostly because I can't justify a bad score. There's no reason not to play it again, but there's really no reward for doing so. My personal take? I love this game. As I said in the beginning, it's one of my all-time favorite games. But personal opinion doesn't change the fact that there are some issues, so 5 out of 6. Which means our final score comes to 4.8 out of 6. Despite my own biases, that's actually pretty fair. On to the awards. The Golden Key Award goes to the game's swordplay. Once you've got your head around the controls and the quick menuing, it starts feeling smooth and above all, fun. And that's really why we're here, isn't it? The Stale Wall Chicken Award goes to Dragon, naturally. Despite the actual boss fight being pretty easy, it has prerequisites the game doesn't mention, and quite frankly, I'm still salty about it. Eat a dick, Dragon. And that's Crystalis. In my opinion, it's still one of the best games on the NES, even if the attempted remake was a little less so. Until next time, I'm FamiComplex. Keep it tuned to Channel 3. Flurry wants to be a part of this. People of the internet, this is Flurry. He's an asshole. Hi. You good? You feel better now? Powder. And this is Powder, who also wanted to be a part of this.